June 20th, 2025, a date that will forever be etched in the annals of history, a day that began like any other, but quickly descended into chaos and uncertainty. The world held its breath, unaware of the storm that was about to break. The Middle East teeters on the edge of all-out war. Years of simmering tensions, proxy conflicts, and veiled threats are about to erupt into a full-blown conflagration. The region, a powder keg of geopolitical rivalries, stands on the precipice. As Israel and Iran's long-simmering rivalry explodes into open conflict, the fragile peace maintained through delicate diplomacy and uneasy truces has finally shattered. The world watches in disbelief as two powerful nations engage in direct confrontation. After years of proxy battles and covert strikes, a shadow war fought in the murky depths of espionage and clandestine operations, the gloves are finally off. The hidden agendas and unspoken animosities are now brought into the harsh light of day. Both nations are now launching direct missile and drone attacks, a brazen escalation that throws the region into turmoil. The skies above the Middle East become a deadly theater of war, filled with the ominous drone of engines and the fiery trails of missiles, shattering any illusion of containment. The conflict, once confined to the shadows, now spills out into the open, threatening to engulf the entire region in its flames. The carefully constructed barriers of diplomacy crumble under the weight of aggression. Israel, citing existential threats, feels it has no other choice but to defend its sovereignty and its people. The leadership believes that inaction would be a fatal mistake, leaving the nation vulnerable to its enemies. From Iran's nuclear ambitions, a program that Israel views as an unacceptable risk to its very existence. The specter of a nuclear-armed Iran looms large, fueling the fears and anxieties that drive Israel's actions, has struck deep into Iranian territory. Precision strikes target key military installations and suspected nuclear sites, sending a clear message of deterrence. The attacks are a calculated gamble, designed to cripple Iran's capabilities and force it to back down. Iran has responded with missile barrages, unleashing a torrent of retaliatory strikes against Israel. The skies light up with the fiery trails of rockets as both nations exchange blows in a deadly dance of destruction, targeting Israeli cities. Civilian populations brace for impact, as air raid sirens wail and the threat of incoming missiles becomes a terrifying reality. The conflict has now reached the doorsteps of ordinary citizens, shattering their sense of security. The world watches, desperate for de-escalation, as leaders convene emergency meetings and scramble to find a diplomatic solution. The United Nations Security Council becomes the focal point of international efforts to avert a wider catastrophe. As failed diplomacy and mutual mistrust fuel a dangerous feedback loop, pushing the two nations further down the path of war. Years of broken promises and failed negotiations have eroded trust, making it increasingly difficult to find common ground. Of attack and retaliation. Each strike provokes a counterstrike, escalating the conflict and making it harder to pull back from the brink. The cycle of violence threatens to spiral out of control, with potentially devastating consequences. The collapse of nuclear agreements, once seen as a cornerstone of regional stability, has removed a crucial safeguard. The absence of these agreements has emboldened both sides, increasing the risk of miscalculation and escalation, and Iran's accelerated uranium enrichment program have heightened tensions and fueled fears of a nuclear arms race. The international community watches with growing alarm as Iran edges closer to acquiring the capability to produce nuclear weapons. Have pushed Israel to act, believing that time is running out to prevent Iran from achieving its nuclear ambitions. The window of opportunity to take decisive action is closing rapidly, forcing Israel to make a difficult and potentially fateful decision, believing its red lines have been crossed. The accumulation of provocative actions and threatening rhetoric has finally pushed Israel to the edge, triggering a response that could have far-reaching consequences. As the violence intensifies, the human cost of the conflict becomes increasingly apparent. Innocent civilians are caught in the crossfire, their lives shattered by the relentless barrage of attacks. World leaders scramble for a diplomatic off-ramp, seeking any avenue to de-escalate the crisis and prevent further bloodshed. The fate of the region, and perhaps the world, hangs in the balance as diplomats work tirelessly behind the scenes. But the window for peace is rapidly closing. With each passing hour, the chances of a peaceful resolution diminish, as the momentum of war gathers pace. The world holds its breath, hoping against hope that a catastrophe can be averted. The stakes are nothing less than regional stability, a region already plagued by conflict and instability, now facing the prospect of all-out war. The consequences of a wider conflict would be devastating, with ripple effects felt across the globe, and possibly global security. The conflict threatens to disrupt global trade, destabilize energy markets, and trigger a new wave of refugees. The world stands at a crossroads, facing a crisis that could reshape the geopolitical landscape for decades to come. As the sun begins its ascent, casting a pale light across the horizon, Friday dawns with more violence. The fragile peace that many had hoped for seems to shatter with each passing hour, replaced by the grim reality of escalating conflict. The air is thick with tension, a palpable sense of dread hanging over the region. Israel launches another wave of airstrikes, a calculated response to perceived threats and provocations. The roar of jet engines pierces the morning calm as fighter planes streak across the sky, carrying their deadly payload towards predetermined targets. The primary objective of these strikes is targeting Iranian missile infrastructure in the West, a strategic move aimed at crippling their ability to launch retaliatory attacks. Intelligence reports suggest a significant buildup of Iranian missile capabilities in this region, making it a high-priority target for the Israeli military. And north. The northern regions of Iran are also under heavy bombardment, as Israel seeks to dismantle the entirety of Iran's missile arsenal. These coordinated strikes are designed to send a clear message: any aggression will be met with swift and decisive action. In response to these attacks, Iran retaliates, its military forces mobilizing to defend their territory and project their power. The airwaves are filled with defiant rhetoric, as Iranian leaders vow to avenge the attacks and inflict pain upon their enemies. The retaliation comes swiftly, with Iran firing missiles at Israeli cities. The skies above are now crisscrossed with deadly projectiles, each carrying the potential for immense destruction. Sirens wail, a piercing sound that sends citizens scrambling for cover. The Iron Dome missile defense system springs into action, intercepting many of the incoming rockets with remarkable precision. Despite the Iron Dome's effectiveness, some missiles hit their mark, slipping through the defensive net and causing widespread damage. A direct strike on the Weizmann Institute, a renowned scientific research facility, sends shock waves through the nation. The impact devastates key research labs, igniting a raging inferno that consumes years of invaluable work. The loss is immeasurable, not just in terms of physical damage, but also in the setback to scientific progress. The attack sends shock waves through the global scientific community, as researchers around the world condemn the targeting of a civilian institution dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. Miraculously, there are no casualties, a testament to the quick thinking and preparedness of the institute's staff. However, years of research are lost, irreplaceable data and equipment destroyed in the blaze. The long-term consequences of this attack will be felt for years to come. Iran offers no justification for the attack, remaining silent in the face of international condemnation. However, the Institute's perceived defense ties, particularly its involvement in military research, make it a symbolic target in the eyes of the Iranian regime. The war's scope widens, engulfing more and more regions in its destructive embrace. Civilian infrastructure, once considered off-limits, is now increasingly targeted in a desperate attempt to cripple the enemy's ability to function. And tragically, cultural sites, the very symbols of a nation's identity and heritage, are now caught in the crosshairs, their preservation threatened by the relentless conflict. Both sides trade accusations of war crimes, each attempting to deflect blame and portray themselves as the victim, each blaming the other for the immense civilian suffering that has become an inevitable consequence of the escalating conflict. The battle for global opinion is as crucial as the military campaign, with both sides vying for international support and legitimacy. The fight for hearts and minds is as fierce as the fight in the skies, a constant struggle to shape the narrative and win the backing of the international community. In Geneva, European diplomats scramble to broker a ceasefire and revive nuclear talks. Iran refuses to negotiate while under attack, demanding Israel halt its strikes first. Israel, citing security, refuses. The talks stall, exposing the deep chasm between the two sides. European leaders propose limits on Iran's enrichment and oversight of its missile program, but their leverage is limited as violence rages. Israeli officials dismiss the talks as a stalling tactic by Iran, insisting only military action can guarantee security. With both sides entrenched, diplomacy struggles to be heard above the roar of war. In Washington, President Trump weighs a fateful choice: launch a U.S. military strike on Iran or hold back. His rhetoric swings between threats and reluctance, but he firmly supports Israel and questions European diplomacy. Trump's claims about Iran's nuclear capabilities outpace his own intelligence agencies, raising the stakes. Iran warns any U.S. attack will trigger swift retaliation against American interests. Discord among Western allies, especially between Trump and Macron, undermines a unified response. Inside the White House, advisors are split: strike decisively or avoid a wider war. The world holds its breath as Trump's decision looms, with consequences that could reshape the region. Beneath the stark headlines and the geopolitical strategies lies a deeper, more profound tragedy. It is the civilians, the ordinary people caught in the crossfire, who bear the brunt of this devastating war. Their stories often go untold, their suffering unseen amidst the larger narrative of conflict. In Iran, the impact of Israeli strikes has been particularly severe, with a mounting death toll reaching over 650 individuals. These are not just numbers. They are fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters whose lives have been tragically cut short. Beyond the fatalities, thousands more have been wounded, many with life-altering injuries that will require extensive medical care and rehabilitation. The healthcare system is struggling to cope with the overwhelming influx of patients. Entire neighborhoods have been reduced to rubble, leaving countless families displaced and without shelter. The physical scars of the conflict are a constant reminder of the devastation. In Israel, the constant threat of missile alerts and attacks has become a terrifying reality for millions. The psychological toll of living under such constant fear is immeasurable. So far, 24 civilians have lost their lives in these attacks, each death a profound loss for their families and communities. Many homes have been damaged or completely destroyed, leaving families without a place to live and struggling to rebuild their lives. Even essential infrastructure, such as hospitals and the Weizmann Institute, has been targeted, further disrupting daily life and essential services. The vibrant pulse of daily life has been replaced by a pervasive atmosphere of fear and uncertainty on both sides of the conflict. People are afraid to leave their homes, unsure of what the next moment might bring. In Gaza, the situation is particularly dire, with a tightened blockade further exacerbating the already precarious humanitarian conditions. The severe fuel shortages are crippling essential services and impacting every aspect of daily life. Hospitals are struggling to function without adequate power, putting the lives of patients at risk. The lack of access to food and clean water is leading to a worsening crisis of child malnutrition, threatening the health and well-being of an entire generation. Humanitarian aid organizations are struggling to reach those in need, facing numerous obstacles and restrictions. The focus on foreign evacuations has, in some cases, overshadowed the urgent needs of the local population, leaving many feeling abandoned and forgotten. Aid groups are desperately pleading for increased access and a cessation of hostilities to allow them to deliver life-saving assistance. However, the ongoing violence and political complexities continue to block the delivery of much-needed relief, leaving countless people in desperate need. Ultimately, the true cost of this conflict is measured not in statistics or political gains, but in the shattered lives and lasting trauma inflicted upon innocent civilians. The road to recovery will be long and arduous. As war rages, a powerful earthquake strikes northern Iran, compounding the crisis. Buildings weakened by airstrikes collapse, overwhelming emergency services already stretched thin. Hospitals flooded with war casualties now face a surge of earthquake victims. International aid is hampered by ongoing hostilities, leaving survivors to fend for themselves. The disaster blurs the line between man-made and natural tragedy. Loss and suffering are the same. The earthquake is a stark reminder of the region's fragility, where even the earth itself offers no refuge. Human conflict and nature's fury collide, deepening the humanitarian nightmare. The specter of nuclear disaster haunts every move. Israel targets Iranian nuclear sites, risking catastrophic radioactive release. The UN and IAEA warn a strike on facilities like Bushehr could trigger a crisis rivaling Chernobyl. Contamination has already been detected at some sites, though not yet at dangerous levels. Israel insists it's avoiding nuclear disaster, but the risk of miscalculation grows with every sortie. Iran maintains its nuclear program is peaceful, but refuses to halt activities under attack. The world watches anxiously, fearing a single mistake could unleash global catastrophe. The conflict sends shockwaves worldwide, exposing deep divisions among global powers. The U.S. stands firmly with Israel, while China and Russia demand immediate de-escalation and a return to diplomacy. The UN Security Council is paralyzed by disagreement, unable to act. The EU tries to mediate, but ongoing violence and hardline positions undermine their efforts. Regional states, especially in the Gulf, are caught between quiet cooperation with Israel and fear of Iranian retaliation. The crisis redraws alliances and fractures the global order, raising the stakes for all. As the second week of war ends, the risk of catastrophic escalation grows. Each side's retaliation fuels a cycle that's hard to break, with nuclear facilities in the crosshairs. U.S. intervention could turn a regional war into a global crisis. Peace demands an immediate ceasefire and unified international pressure to halt the violence. Only robust, verifiable de-escalation and renewed diplomacy can address the core security fears on both sides. The path is fraught, but the alternative is unthinkable devastation. The world must act before peace becomes impossible.